So basically, I'm going to ask questions, and then you're not recording yet, right?
Of course not.
No, you're my sound guy. You got to give me a 3, 2, 1, and then you can just kind of answer these as you see fit. There's no, just answer them as long or as short as you want, and then
Okay.
I may, based on something you say, I might ask a follow up that's not on here.
Okay.
But we'll go through all of them, and it'll be fun. We'll learn a lot.
Go ahead and say dates and what this is and all that kind
Okay.
of cool stuff.
All right, it's November 29th, 2008, and happy birthday, Kaylin, by the way, and Clay. What we're doing is we're doing some interviews today as a way to recognize National Family Remembering Day, which happened to be yesterday. So our first interview this morning is going to be with Fred, aka Grandpa Fred. We have a host of questions that we pulled together. Kara solicited questions from everybody in the family. We put them together, some that were similar. We created hybrid questions, and then we added a couple extras just to mix it up a little bit. So we'll put them in order and we'll see how it goes. All right, morning, Grandpa.
Good morning.
All right, first question, probably from one of your grandchildren. What sports did you participate in as a kid, and why do you enjoy them?
Well, I loved to play sports when I was a kid, and I was not real good at any of them. But I used to go to the park and play basketball, and temperamentally I was a center, even though I was short and slow and couldn't jump and didn't have a very good shot. But I played tennis, and I played badminton, and I played baseball and softball, and probably one of my highlights was when my friend David Silberstein, who was a very good athlete, and he put me on the team, and I was kind of hidden at second base, and they hit a pop-up. This must have been when I was in about the 4th grade, and of course, against all expectations, with everybody running, I caught the ball, and that was a big success. So that was my softball career.
Oh, that's great. That's probably, what is that? That almost must be what Lachlan's age.
What year was that?
He was 4th grade.
God, I don't know, 4th grade, I must have been 9, something like
Yeah.
that.
Was that Manhattan?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
PS 189.
PS 189 in Manhattan.
Okay, while you were in school, who was your favorite teacher? And describe him or her. I'm imagining it's a her.
Well, my favorite teacher was probably Miss Gibson, who was later Mrs. Valentine. When I had my appendix out when I was in the 7th grade, I was the only child in the hospital ward that was getting the New York Times as a newspaper. So she came to visit me, and she was a beauty contest winner, and she really was a very she was a nice teacher, and I remember her. I also remember when I was in the 1st and 2nd grade, and Mrs. Lowe had a paper cutter, and she called it her decapitating machine, and everybody was very afraid of Mrs. Lowe, but she gave us a good start. And I remember my other teachers too. I also remember in 4th grade, Alfred Avazian and me had a paper route, which was really great because we'd get out of class and we would go and deliver our papers, and then we were allowed occasionally to climb out on the roof of this gym that was actually on like the 2nd or 3rd floor, and when kids would play stickball in the schoolyard, Spaldings, the pink rubber balls that everybody in New York City knew what they were, would go on the roof, and we could go and take those, and we'd get tips and we'd get cookies, and it was really a pretty good sinecure even for those days.
Doesn't sound very safe. Would you let your grandkids do that today?
Oh sure,
Oh,
I
okay.
was safe.
Okay, all right. When you were a child, you had a couple hobbies. What were they?
Well, one of the hobbies that I've had that I really I haven't pursued recently, but I collected stamps, and when we'd have a significant occasion, I don't know, birthday or something or other, I would ask my mother or my father to get a good stamp. So somewhere in this house is a stamp collection that really is quite valuable.
I would
And,
imagine.
I think it hasn't been discarded along with everything else, but it's something that I'd want Peter to have.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now you have trains, so I remember trains.
Oh, well, that was actually my father's.
Oh, it was. So it was passed down to you.
No, it wasn't. No, they weren't. No, they were my trains, but it was my father's hobby. And the trains, if we'd actually taken care of them, would have been much more valuable than they presently are, because we had 3 engines. We had Silky and Blackie and Tom.
One had
And we
steam
had-
that came out, right?
Oh, they all had steam.
Oh, they all
Put
did.
the thing
Okay.
in there. And they were American Flyer, because those were 2-track trains. And we would set up these elaborate layouts, and then we would see which train got to the crossing first. And my father knew that they were really a toy, but he loved to play with them just as much as anybody else. And so Kara and Jimmy's children have trains, and they have a nice train set too, which someday maybe they'll enjoy playing with a little bit more than they do now. So,
Well, I know that your grandchildren, I mean, I know it's just the Geotracks, but I know that
oh,
they
well,
love those
well,
Geotracks.
Well, they love their trains too, and those are really fun. Of course, a couple of days ago, when Keith was asked would he like to share with his other cousins, and they all play so well together, and he said no. And then when he was threatened with timeout, he took time out rather than to admit that he would share.
But he was asked a question,
But
right?
they really do love, they do love their trains, and now I understand Julianne loves the trains too, and that's good, because that's a nice hobby for kids to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, how old were you when you first started getting into stamp collecting, for example?
I must have been in elementary school, or towards the end of it, maybe when I was in 6th grade or 7th grade.
Okay. Oh, very good. Okay, now let's think about since we've got the holidays coming up, think of your favorite family holiday tradition as a child.
Well, probably the holiday that was the most fun was Passover, because in the Jewish Passover, the service can't be concluded unless they have the afikomen, which is half of the second matzah.
Okay.
And the way that that's done, the not too bright parent hides the afikomen someplace where the little children are likely to go find it,
Right.
which of course would be, since the service can't conclude without that, that's a vital part. So somebody finds the afikomen, and then it has to be ransomed in order to conclude the service. So that's really a Jewish tradition in there. And of course, it's like an Easter egg hunt,
Right.
which we also had, by the way. We'd go out to Haledon, where my cousin Walter Marks lived, and Madeline, and they would hide Easter eggs in the backyard, and we painted Easter eggs, my sister and my mother, and then we would have an Easter egg hunt.
Okay. Well, let's
That
talk
was-
about
that was
Joan
fun,
a little
too.
bit. Let's talk about what's the memory that you have of Joan and you together when you were little.
Well, the memory that I have of Joan is the picture of her in her cowgirl suit, and Tony, David, and me in our cowboy suits, and we're little angels, and Joan, for some reason, is crying her eyes out. I remember that. And then I remember when I was in the, I guess I was in the 2nd grade, and Joan was in the 1st grade, and I was supposed to bring her home. And I came home without her. And my mother asked where was Joan, and I said, I forgot. I guess I would have been in the 3rd grade and she was in the 1st grade, so we had to go back and get her.
Retrieve your sister. Okay. This is kind of an interesting question. If you could go back and talk to, doesn't have to be 15-year-old self, but it could be, you know, yourself as a teen or something, what advice would you give yourself?
Well, I wasn't unhappy with my with myself, generally speaking, but I probably have 2 or 3 left feet, and I wish I was more socially accomplished, and I'm just so pleased that Peter and actually all of you are just such good dancers, and you know, there's lots of times when it just would have been nice to be able to do that, and I know Mimi loves to dance, and I can barely do a box step, and we took dancing lessons, but of course, so that was how I learned how to do a box step, but I have to fake it to a huge degree if we're dancing.
Wow, okay. That's a good one, I like that. Did you have a nickname growing up?
No.
No?
Fred.
From going just by Fred.
Today is Grandpa Fred.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
well,
right.
I love Grandpa Fred. Mimi never wanted to be called Grandma, but I love being Grandpa Fred.
Absolutely. Okay, now this one is a little bit about when you were older. This one comes from Kara, as a matter of fact. Tell us what your work was with the civil rights movement in the 1960s and why you decided to get involved.
Well, the high school that I went to, Bronx Science, was a academic high school, and actually some of the people that are prominent today, actually many of the people that are prominent today went to Bronx Science. You had to take a special admissions test, and students that got into that high school were really accomplished in all fields. Like there used to be a program, the $64,000 question, and the person that answered that correctly was at our high school, and Stokely Carmichael was at our high school, who was prominent in the civil rights movement, and other people were in that too. It was a very activist high school in a very liberal city.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to college, I was involved in service activities. I was involved in Alpha Phi Omega, which is a national service fraternity, and we ran the bookstore, and we ran the Ugly Man on Campus contest, and we did things like that. And one of the things that I did get involved with was Columbia had a chapter that was involved with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference of Dr. Martin Luther King, and I remember that we went to Atlanta, and I met Dr. King, although it was very brief. We didn't share ideas as to what his idea was for the civil rights movement, but we met other people that became prominent, Julian Bond and Hosea Williams, and some other people, Reverend Abernathy, other people as well. And our particular chapter had a project to do voter registration in Orangeburg, South Carolina, and some of the other areas there. And this was in a very dangerous time. It was, we think of the elections that we just had, the first black vice president, but this was at the time of Philadelphia, Mississippi, where 2 civil rights workers were killed, and this was not too long after the desegregation in Selma and other places like that. And my mother, I remember, was very concerned about me going there, and my father was concerned too, but my father felt if that's what I believed, that's what I should do.
Absolutely.
And when when we had the election, and they had some of the comments of Representative Lewis, and it was very emotional time for a lot of people, and it was very emotional for me too, just because this was a culmination of parts of things that always should be part of America.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
I'm very proud to be part of that. Not a huge thing, but it was something we did, and I actually made several trips down there. We had some wonderful families that were hosts to us, and we had a place that we could stay, more or less camp out, and we would go just and sign people up to register to vote and speak at churches and do things like that. And
So very much a grassroots effort there,
and,
sure.
and the affinity of people of any religion that practice it, you know, it's really very touching, you know, as far as that goes. There's an awful lot that people have in common.
Right.
And one of the things which I've always felt to be very important is not to allow prejudice, things that are not true, to color our views of things. I mean, it's tempting to take people that are poor or black or whatever and just assign things to them that just may not be true. There are people that are not worthy people, but you can't believe things that are not true.
Right. I agree with that.
In today's, having lived through history like that and been a part of it and been actually instrumental in some regards, what is living in 2008, seeing a black president being elected, being able to be alive and in your lifetime to be able to see that happen, what kind of thoughts and feelings?
Well, it's historic, but I think in time people will realize, at least hopefully, that this is simply a historic individual, a person who really has the opportunity to span races and to span cultural differences and to unite the country in things that are very, very important. The task that we have at this particular time is really just a tremendous one. I can see a path where he could succeed, but it's going to require a tremendous amount of insight and a tremendous amount of cooperation and help to do that. We've got ourselves into some very, very difficult circumstances. We haven't practiced an open society. We've come off, in my opinion, I don't want to turn this into a political.
No, it's okay, but it's talking about what's relevant during the context of this time.
The person that's president of the United States has to realize that they're president of all of the people. And that's really something that we haven't had, and I think that's something that we have had. And I think also, just as an example, that as a couple, the Obamas can be an incredibly inspiring couple, and their family. They've got beautiful children. I think Michelle Obama is beautiful, but also we're moving back towards a society, hopefully, that respects knowledge, that the people that we're choosing to lead us at this time, and hopefully they'll be able to accomplish that, are people that have done the very best in the fields that they have. And one of the things that I've been so proud of in our family is the achievements of all of you, each in different areas and each with different priorities, but I'm immensely proud of what you've accomplished in the Navy, starting with colleges and for everyone for 3 days or whatever it is you went to school and what Kara's accomplished when she, when she decided, or Mimi decided that she shouldn't get married and called that off, and I wound up with all the bills. But I'm really so proud of that. And Lander, when he got, was recognized for the courage that he's shown, just to, to be part of that. Every one of you, Kaylin was the outstanding employee. Krista received awards. This is an award-winning family, and I suppose some people would get tired. I sometimes think other people had children too, and other people may be proud of their families, but I'm immensely proud of our family.
Let's talk a little bit about, we've got so many of the grandchildren that are in school right now, and they're working hard on what they're doing. What kind of student were you in school? And because I know education is so important to you, so, and talk about your favorite subject in school, if you had one that you could single out.
Well, first of all, I was a lot better student than Mimi thinks. And, I mean, through grade school, when, to the extent that they gave grades, I always did very well. And you can't really, the school I went to was one of the better elementary schools, and then I went to Bronx Science, and Bronx Science doesn't even give class rankings. I mean, we had kids in there that were geniuses. As a matter of fact, in my high school senior science project, we had a lab, and the person that I was working with, somebody named Michael Maller, although he was only in high school, was already working in the space program. So when we had to go and to try and figure out what, to show the rate of gravity, my job was to knock the little car off the edge of the table, and he would put all of the data into the tape that we were doing. And it was really, high school was fun too, because in Bronx Science, if we ever took a Regents course, which was given to everybody in the state, that was like, you could sleep through the whole class, I mean, the whole year, because everybody would get a 90 or well above it in there. And I remember Mr. Gellis, my science teacher, and he would say, do you think you'll do well on the Regents? And I had like a 95 average at Bronx Science, why wouldn't I do well on the Regents? So I always in high school did very, very well. Then I went into Columbia, and Columbia, which is a great school, right, is less competitive in my view than the high school. High school, not that Columbia doesn't have people that are geniuses too, but they so my grades in Columbia were decent, but I wasn't excuse me, I wasn't really motivated I didn't have something that I really wanted to do as a single career that I pursued just that way. So I started out as an engineer, and then I switched over to history, and I enjoyed history. The course that I enjoyed the most, though, the one that influenced me the most, was Art Humanities, which was a required course. And I remember writing a painting on a picture, an essay on Giovanni Bellini, and one of the great artists. And what happened was that was at the Frick Museum, and it was a beautiful painting. And you learned what to appreciate in art. I also remember I took a course in British history, and I wrote a paper on that, and I was writing on coal mining in Britain in the 1600s, and I put every single fact that I knew into that paper. I don't know if it had to be 3 pages or 5 pages or whatever it was. And I got an A+ on it, and it said, this paper is just the right length, and it really covers the subject without going into too much detail. And I said, Yes, because I couldn't have written another line no matter what. I put every fact that I knew into the paper, so that was my, I've tried to encourage my grandchildren to not only to do their very best, but to challenge themselves by putting them in places where they are with the very best, where they can learn things both from their fellow students and from their professors, and also from the university environment that they're in. We would have reading lists, and it wouldn't have one book on it, or we'd read a chapter a week. You'd read the book, or you'd read the original document, or there'd be people that wrote the book, and that's really something that I know everybody has to. I'd be satisfied. I told Peter when he was going to school that I was quite reasonable. I would be pleased with any grade that he got. I said A plus, A minus, any one of those would be okay. Because anything less than that, to be honest with you, I would accept way less than that if that was all that he could do. But I wouldn't have been pleased with anything less than that if those were the grades that he could get. And I was very pleased that I remember when he was with Natalie, and Natalie was at our house, and this was before they were engaged, but they were going together, and of course I was fishing for information, so I asked Natalie, did she think that Peter was smart, and she said, "Oh yes, Mr. Neuburger, he's very smart. He must be to get the grades that he does working as little as he does." So that was the good news is there's golf in heaven, the bad news is you play tomorrow. So that was really...
Well, I just have to ask you about your papers in school. Did you type your own work, or did you type your own papers?
Yeah.
Did you?
Or,
Like on an IBM Selectric?
oh boy, the one that you wouldn't believe, it's probably in a museum somewhere.
The manual type? Really?
Yeah.
Really? Wow. Okay. All right. Well, I want to ask you now, what's the best advice you ever got, and who gave it to you?
Well, I don't know whether people really gave me advice per se, but when I was among jobs, and I was thinking about how many years it took me to become an instant success, and we probably don't have enough tape in there to go through all the different jobs that I have, and the president of our one company was killed in a plane crash, and the other ones, they wanted me to move out to Grand Rapids after I got married, and it goes on and on and on. But when I was really among jobs and not really doing very much, one of my tax clients suggested that I should talk to Don Dupay, and that was how I first got affiliated with Legend. And it was kind of funny because Don Dupay, who was the first person I met, was a retired colonel, and he was very, very much into organizational structure and things like that. And the individual that I met, who I was supposed to be in reverence of or awe of, was Chris Harris, who was in charge of our office. And I had just come out of a corporate environment where the term stuffed suit must have been originated as far as that goes. So, telling me that somebody was a vice president was like waving a red flag in front of a bull. But Chris and I got along very, very well. And Chris is really a very, very remarkable person. He's a little bit younger than I am. But he appreciated me and allowed me to be myself. Mm-hmm. And over the years, particularly in the early years, I learned that, and I showed them that I could do things my way, which was different than the way that anybody else did them. Right. But I also learned that the way that was suggested to me, often by Chris, would save a tremendous amount of time. So I learned things from him, and he learned, and Legend learned many, many things from me. Many of the ideas that we have used now for 25 years, I can tell when they started because I was the one that started them. And another person who was very instrumental and was probably, as a person who influenced me, was my friend John Parks from Buffalo. And the way that he influenced me was that I was used to, in a corporate environment, going to meetings that really had no purpose. We'd get called away to go to a conference in February when the financial statements were due, so all it did was make February even shorter and things like that, just a waste of time. But John was working along with Mike Baer on handheld computers, and he did the programming and made things available to people at Legend just to help them. And I thought that was really a wonderful principle. So throughout my career, as much as I could, I really simply helped people because I thought it was a good thing to do. And so that was, those were, it's hard to say that other people influenced me. I'm too stubborn, or they can't remember anymore, but those were people that, particularly Chris is somebody that is tremendously important.
Very good. Okay, well, this is one of those questions we added in the middle here. We want to know the craziest thing that Grandpa Fred has ever done.
Well, there are three things that I've listed. You know, it's kind of like, well, people are asking us because we travel so much. Where's the best places that you've been, or whatever. So, the stupidest thing I ever did, and something that terrorizes me to this day, was when Peter and I were in South Africa, and we were in a cave, and there was a little adjunct to the cave, and if you were a 12-year-old in good shape, you could go through the things there and crawl between the rocks, and it must have been a lot of fun. And anyway, but Peter convinced me that I could do that too, and I did that, and I got stuck on my back where I couldn't move in a narrow gap under the rocks, and I can tell you that panic set in a matter of seconds. I've never had anything that, and I can think about that, and I can see it
Right
set
back.
in again, even sitting here now. But the stupidest thing that I ever did was I went parasailing, and we were in one of the Caribbean islands or another, and I decided that I should do it before I was 50, because it would be truly stupid to do it after I was 50. So we started out, and I'm behind the boat there, and there's a rope that you hang on, and they put a strap underneath your knees, and there's a strap there, and we're going along, and all of a sudden I felt the strap on my rear starting to slip a little bit. And I'm not even sure that it was, but I thought it was. So we're up in the air, and then I remembered, that I wasn't all that strong, and hanging on to the ropes was not such a great idea either. So, I made sure that my knees were tucked under me and held on for dear life, and I did make it safely back to the raft. But I have to tell you, the portion of the trip before that thing started to slip was a lot more fun than the one after. I mean, the other stupid thing that I did, number 3 on my list there, was climbing to the top of the Wild Goose Pavilion in Xi'an, China. But that was only stupid because it was, why would you want to climb up that many flights of stairs when you could get a postcard of what you could see.
How big was that?
Well, it's big enough that it would make you think that it was a project to climb. And it's like climbing up to the top of the Statue of Liberty or something like that.
Oh, okay.
You can do it, but why would you be dumb enough to want to?
Because you can see. Now, we talked a little bit about Chris Harrison and the work that you did, but if you could have chosen a different career path, what would it have been? If it could have been anything at all, would you have stayed on the path, or would you have tried something different?
I certainly wouldn't have done things differently than what I've done with Legend. I'm trying to write my Christmas letter, and there's some things I need to discuss with people about changes that we might make due to age and other issues. But there's a saying that if you do what you love, you never have to work a day in your life. So that really is true. On the other hand, and it's not really an other hand, but the experiences that I had that before I worked for Legend
Right.
really a part of my history too, and they taught me. I remember when I was working for Rose Patch, and their this was kind of a really neat job too. I was accounting manager, and there was a controller, and he hired me at Texmark, and then a month or two later he left, but I was too inexperienced to become controller at that point. So somebody else came in who was younger than me and was on a fast track within the company, and he was named Tom Ordansky. He was a really nice person too. And I remember, he would talk about what's your career path here, and I told him, I said, well, you could die, which was, or there were other choices too, as it turned out. So he left. But the point was that I really was not unhappy where I was either doing that. And then I wound up becoming controller, both of Texmark and then the division in the Bronx and a couple of divisions in Canada. And it wasn't as important as it seemed, but it was really it was a good position, and I was happy with all the jobs that I had. But the one that working for Legend has just been so satisfying, at least up until a few months ago. So.
The market, is that
Yeah,
what you're
with the
talking
market.
about?
as
Absolutely,
far as
okay.
that goes.
All right. Let's see, we would like to know how you met Mimi.
I won her at the card table. I had played bridge in college, and I was in Vista also after college. After my experiences with the voter registration work, I spent a year in Vista, which is Volunteers in Service to America, out in Danville, Illinois, and I even learned to play bridge a little bit out there. And we worked in the Head Start program, and we worked with migrant workers, and we started a youth coffee house. And there was a worthwhile year that I spent there. And then with somebody that I had met through my civil rights work, I was actually got a job down in Washington, D.C., and that was how I came down to Washington, D.C. And back in those days, I was playing bridge 5 or 6 or 7 days a week. As far as that goes, I was Rookie of the Year in Washington, D.C. I came up to Syracuse. I still was a beginner in real bridge terms. But I learned and I played with some very good players in Washington, D.C. And there's players that win national championships, and I know who they are because they were starting out when I was, and there's still people that I know. They play better than me, and they played much more successfully than I have. But when I came up to Syracuse, I met people like John Herman, who's been a friend over a number of years, and Aaron and Annie and other players, and I started to do well. This was really sort of funny too, and this really is how I did meet Mimi. But just the first time I came up to Syracuse, I came into the game at the Yates Hotel, and in Washington, the person who sold entries was the owner of the club, and he was really a pretty good player. So I went to buy an entry, and the lady, said, who are you or whatever it was, and she said, well, I'll play with you, and I was really pleased. So I played with her in a Friday night game, and we won. And I didn't know it at the time, but this was Gladys Reed, and winning with her was a real triumph. It was really hit the ball and drag the body.
Yeah.
And the second week, I came back and I played with somebody named Rudy Gowron, who was, I think he was an engineer at General Electric, and he was a smart individual, but he was not very much better than Gladys Reed, and we played with him, and we won again. Now, that didn't change people's opinion of Gladys and Rudy, but it really made it a lot easier for me to start playing with people there. And then, you know, we won a lot. And Carol was playing bridge fairly regularly on a Tuesday night and at some of the other games there. And I met her playing bridge. And,
So you met at the bridge table,
Mhm.
basically?
yeah, basically.
Okay. All right, good. Now, how did you propose?
Well, I think I more or less talked her into it. I'm really not even sure, you know, other,
To this day, you don't know how that happened?
it wasn't skywriting or anything like that. I'm a bit younger than she is, and, you know, and she only had the 4 of you at the time, and, you know, so it was really a matter of convincing her that it would be, you know, that really was what I thought that we should do. So we did, and it's worked out reasonably well, you know, for the last
Get the number
30
right.
years more than Peter is. I guess we got married in 1974, so
Right, and then Peter in
about
76.
34 years.
So, let's talk a little bit about Peter here. What's your favorite memory of Peter as a child? And I'm
Well-
sure there's only 1 or 2.
Well, Peter, we were so lucky because this was one of the easiest children to raise that anybody could have. And somebody had asked, was Peter spoiled? And I think Kaylin said, well, he's not really that spoiled for a child that's never had his feet on the floor. I mean, he grew up with 4 older sisters who were there to take care of him. And I have some memories that I mean, there's just so many that are funny. I remember when he'd get under the covers and he was, we would make him into a pizza, and we'd put the stuff around and we'd put mushrooms on it, we'd put pepperoni on it, we'd do all of the things that you needed to do, and he would just laugh and laugh. And that was really, I never read books on how to develop a sense of humor, but it really is part of that. But the thing that just, the memory that really makes me melt is when he was an infant, and I'm really not even sure how old he was, but when he couldn't, when he was frustrated or he couldn't do something,
Right.
and you would just see his lower lip start to tremble, you know, and there's just, it's just so, it's just such a tender moment there, you
Absolutely.
know, as far as that goes. So he really was, but I mean, there's other stories that are such fun, like when we went shopping one day at Kmart near Christmas time, and he must have been 5 or somewhere around there, and he went in and said, we were going to get something in the camera section or whatever, and he went by Atari and he said, can I have one of those for Christmas? And I said, well, and it wasn't really something that we planned on getting him. You know, so I said, no, you know, couldn't. He thought for a moment, he said, that's okay, Dad, just as long as you have enough for my college education. You know,
Even then.
So anyway, I'm not, that's not one, but there's just so many memories when he was.
Well, you've done a lot of traveling. So, and you've really introduced it to some of the older grandkids, which is terrific. They've had an opportunity to do 2 wonderful trips with you. What's the favorite place you've traveled to, and what made it so special?
Well, I don't, we've been to so many places, and they're such different kinds of places that we've gone to. I mean, when we took the kids first was London, and there's just so many things to do just in London itself. I mean, London's a fascinating city, and we love Rome, and we love Spain and Portugal. What I've done with the grandchildren, and if I'm able to, I'd like to have another grandpa trip this year, Grandpa Fred and Mimi trip this year, and we'll go someplace else. And I've tried to follow some things that I believe are important in doing that. I also had a wonderful trip with Todd to Washington, D.C. for 3 days, and we did more in 3 days than any person that I ever described it to. So you can't do all that. We did all of that, and we not only did we do all of that, I'll tell you about that for just a moment. One of the things that I did when we went out to dinner was I wanted to have him try different things. So we went to a Chinese restaurant that served dim sum, and we went to an Indian restaurant that had a lunch buffet, and we went to a French restaurant near where we were staying in Alexandria, and we went to a Mediterranean restaurant that had small plates, and one of the places that we went to was a Spanish restaurant that had tapas, and we really had a wonderful meal there. And the last day we were in my schedule, which was to do something, a different experience each day, and we were going to go to a South American steakhouse or something like that, and I'm sure it would have been really very, very good. But I asked Todd, I said, would you like to go back to the tapas restaurant that we did? And you know, I could just see him light up, and, you know, and it's when you have kids, yes, they really got that one right.
Right.
We had another really great meal there. Going back to the trip with the 5 oldest grandchildren, what I wanted to do was this, and this is way ahead of their ability to do some of these things on their own, but I really didn't want to spare any expense that would detract from doing the very best that could be, going to the best places, eating at the best places, traveling to the best places, staying at the best places. We stayed at a couple of hotels in Madrid that are and in Seville that are in the book of places to go see, even if you're not staying there. You know, and why wouldn't you? Because, you know, when you think about it, a few years from now, you're never going to remember that you saved $100 on the room, but you might remember that, I remember that place, we stayed there, and it's part of a memory. And I think that probably as a result of those trips, there'll be things that they may have learned that they won't really even realize that they know until somebody else is talking about it, or until they happen to be in a situation and they said, oh yeah, I've done that. We took a trip on the Thames. With Todd, we went to a Mets game. We went to the Bullfight Museum. You know, we went and saw a play in London. I mean, we did other things as well as simply look at all of the things there. We saw Windsor Castle, but we also looked at Queen Mary's Doll's House, which is a wonderful a miniature thing. So we've really done a lot of the things, not only just to say that we've been here and touched that and then went to someplace else, but that we really got to enjoy them. We didn't really have, this is the amount of time that we could spend. Now, if we had less ability to travel, and this really applies to Mimi, there's the old thing that Mickey Mantle had said, that if he knew he was going to live that long, he would have taken better care of himself. Well, we've had so many opportunities to travel that we actually have probably undereducated ourselves and just simply let things filter in to make up a total picture of the world. We've learned things unintentionally as to how pieces are, put together. And we could have done a lot more. We could have done a lot more, but I'm not really sure that we wanted to. We'll go to a great museum, but we're not going to spend the whole day there. A couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours will be enough. This last trip that we were on, we got to go to the Orsay, see some of the great painters, the paintings that we really that we really loved, and we'd, you know, go in front of it and say, oh yeah, I forgot that this one was here, but this is something that I really, you know, it's a beautiful painting, and I'm glad that we got to see it again.
Very good. All right, well, we've got a couple more minutes, so I want to get a couple more questions in. This is kind of just a fun question. What's your favorite movie?
My favorite movie of the 2 or 3 that I've seen is probably My Cousin Vinny.
Okay. Well, then maybe a better question for you is what's your favorite book, and which one would you recommend?
No, the better question is what's my favorite movie, because I watch it constantly, as you know, whenever it's on.
You can pick it up in the middle and just watch it.
It's just such a, the dialogue is so, you know, these 2 Utes, and you know, Peter has memorized the large amounts of film dialogue, and on that one I could almost match him as far as that goes.
Very good, very good. This is definitely a question from one of your grandchildren. They want to know if you've ever owned a pair of blue jeans.
Well, not ever in their lifetime. Unless what I have on is
No, doesn't
dungarees.
count.
If it's dungarees that are blue, I actually did own dungarees when I was younger. And I never really made a conscious effort not to own dungarees.
Right.
And I never bought ones that were in fashion because I never understood what fashion was. But I don't, and it may be not in your memory either, but
No.
there were times in my life that I did own the dungarees.
Very good. Okay, let's, advice about life that you want to share with your grandchildren.
Well, it's so important that they have to lead it too. I mean, there's nothing that you should do this because I said so. And there are some principles that have been important to me, and I think if they are important to them, it will help them to love and respect knowledge, to look for the truth, not to be swayed by things that may be popular but just happen not to be true, to develop a sense of humor, and I can't tell you how to develop a sense of humor, but it's to look at things. It's not funny and it's not fun to make fun of people, to take people that have whatever handicap or whatever idea that you don't agree with and use that to berate them. But you can have an inflated view of yourself, and it does well to let some air out of that balloon as far as that goes. And to always work your hardest. And there are things in my mind that I think I deserve credit for that other people probably would never see the way that I see them. But there were many, many times when I wasn't as involved in things as I probably should have been. But I was earning money so that other people could do the things that were important to them. And that's similar to what my father did. And so I've tried to be a little bit more involved, or a lot more involved, in actually being there physically as well as supporting things. But when Mimi stopped working, I said, well, you do the fun part, and you do the important, the hugging part, and you do the traveling, part as far as that goes, so that other things are possible. And I'll just do some of the things that make it possible for people to do things. And as far as to who influenced me the most, as much as my mother is involved in so many different activities and has so many
talents as far as that goes. But I would have to say it's my father. I don't think that he ever did anything I was proud of or respectful of, whatever. He was just at the temple. I know when I spoke at his funeral, there would be votes on the board of trustees of 9-1, and my father didn't believe that it was best. There wasn't any reason that he wouldn't do that. My father loved knowledge. He would read encyclopedias. I went through high school. There was never a word that I couldn't ask my father what it meant. He always knew that.
So listen to your parents might be a good one. Some advice
Well,
for
it
the
depends on
future.
what they're saying. But yeah.
Grandpa, thank you so much for talking with us. We
Yeah.
really appreciate it today. Thank you. We went right to the end of the tape, right?